Welcome to the Humanities Team podcast with me, Steve Farrell. Humanities Team is an international spiritual movement whose purpose is to communicate and demonstrate the timeless truth that we are all one, with the divine and all life, caring for each other and the world we share, so that people's actions reflect this profound understanding within our generation. We believe that living this truth is essential to resolving the most chronic and acute world challenges and vital to creating a flourishing world of peace, harmony, and happiness. We offer transformative education programs in personal and spiritual development, and we host an annual event called Global Oneness Day. Similar to Earth Day, which galvanized the global environmental movement, Global Oneness Day has become a catalyst for spiritual activism and an integral part of the present-day global oneness movement, which represents a profound new paradigm in human culture. Humanities Team is the only global nonprofit organization working in transformational education. Since we are a nonprofit, there is no focus on growing profits or satisfying shareholders, and 100% of all revenue goes toward our work supporting conscious evolution, planetary awakening, and flourishing at every level of life. If you'd like to learn more about us or want to support our mission directly through donation or volunteering some of your time, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org. And lastly, if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review.
So welcome to the call. Please get comfortable. We've got an incredible hour in store. I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Coordinating Director for Humanities Team, and I have Neale Donald Walsch with me, the author of the Conversations with God books and the founder of Humanities Team. I'm going to be speaking to him here very shortly, and you won't want to miss his insights into how we can live in oneness in our own life and as a public service leader where we're conscious. We'll get to that here in just a minute. First, I want to share why we created this summit, Living in Oneness, the 5 Pillars for Success. It's because what we can see, even in our own homes here within Humanities Team, is that oneness can be an intellectual construction, something very abstract that we have some sense of. But when it comes to really living in oneness in our own life, and then living in oneness with our significant other in a close relationship, living in oneness with our family where we're raising conscious kids, living in oneness in the workplace where we're creating a conscious workplace and maintaining that conscious workplace, and then living in oneness as a public service leader where we're out public speaking and we're leader out in our community, in our country, in the world. In all of these areas of our life, what occurs to us is that it's valuable to have tools for really living in oneness. So it's not something abstract. And so that's why we created the Humanities Team University about a year ago, and that's why we created this summit this year, Living in Oneness, the 5 Pillars for Success. If it's true that we really are all connected, that there's one presence, and we're all a part of that one presence, then doesn't it make sense to really live that way and not just go to the movie theater and watch Avatar and have a great experience of oneness and then leave the movie theater and go back out on the street and live in the illusion of separation? Isn't it time that we create a planet that really lives and breathes in oneness? So that's what this summit is about. We are going to have a very, what I'm going to call unplugged discussion here the next hour. It's going to be very authentic. There will be no filtering. You might have heard Neale and I chatting here just as we were getting started, and that's what we were sharing with each other. And one of the things I love about Neale, who is such an amazing man, of course he is the author of the Conversations with God books, he's the founder of Humanities Team, but more importantly, he is a spiritual activist, and that's why he is embodied, is to do this work, and there's never anything that is off limits. He always invites me or anybody to talk about anything that has to do with God and life. So before I bring him on, just 3 quick things. One, something that we like to do as we get started is just a one moment to oneness spiritual experience. So with your eyes closed or your eyes open, let's go ahead and just release our agendas and our thoughts. And let's just feel God's light, the universe's light just streaming down through our crown chakra, through our bodies, reflecting in our hearts, connecting all of us on this phone call, this conference call, connecting our hearts and our hands all over the world, and just seeing the whole earth that's aglow in oneness, living as who it really is in this loving presence, this healing presence, this light-filled presence, this eternal presence. Okay, and as we open our eyes, let's do this oneness hand signal. It's got a minor adaptation. Peter Melton, who created the oneness hand signal, made this adaptation in the last week. If we start with our fingers still in the peace signal, it says our bodies are separate, and then we bring the fingers together. As we know, though, there is only one presence, and now bring the two fingers together where to our heart space, where we say, because of course we know we are all one, and as we touch our heart with our two fingers together, that of course is the center where we're connected with God, with each other, and with life around us. And Peter, thank you for the oneness hand signal. Such an easy way to go out in the world with oneness. The next thing I want to mention is if you're on the webinar, I want to invite you to put your name, your city, and your country in the window. And also during the next hour, if you have inspirations, comments, or questions that you want to share, please place them in the window. We'll get to at least a few of these during the hour. The last thing I want to share is tomorrow's program is 1 hour later, so please note that. Ken Wilber is coming on from 1 to 2 Pacific. It's the only program that's not between 12 and 1 Pacific time. Tomorrow's program is 1 hour later between 1 and 2 Pacific, so you'll just want to make note of that. And now I want to welcome Neale Donald Walsch to the call. And Neale, it is always so incredible to have you with us, and especially this call where we're launching the Living in Oneness Summit, and you, of course, are our first speaker.
Thank you, Steve. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm so happy that so many people from around the world have chosen to join together in this moment and be here as well, so that we can just raise our consciousness, raise our awareness, raise our participation in the whole process and experience of oneness around the world. So I want to thank Humanity's team for all that it has done to produce and create this opportunity and this experience. And I want to say to everyone, do not think that it is insignificant that you are here. This is more than just sitting on the telephone and listening to people talk. This is, as I mentioned a moment ago, about raising consciousness, raising awareness, and enlarging the energy. You know, even if you listen to a conversation with which you already agree, you might say, well, there's nothing new here. Why am I listening to this? The very act of listening, the very act of participating in the way you're participating, increases and multiplies the energy that is being created by the experience itself. You may know that quantum physicists have told us now in recent science that nothing that is observed is unaffected by the observer. May I please indulge myself and repeat that? I want to repeat it because I want you to really hear what I said. Science is now telling us, quantum physics is now telling us, nothing that is observed is unaffected by the observer. That is, the very fact of observing something creates it as larger than it was before and different than it was before. It actually creates it in the mold and in the form and in the shape that the observer has chosen. And when the observers are multitudinous, then we get to what was told to us by all the great spiritual masters. Wherever two or more are gathered, there is God. So the very act of being on this call right now is far more powerful than many people might have thought. That's the power of oneness.
Amen to that, Neale. And so we are going to go right into these questions that talk about how can we live in oneness more fully in our own life and then as a spiritual leader. And Neale, the first question I have here is regarding one of the very, very key things that is said throughout the Conversations with God books. It says that if we don't go within, we go without. That is shared repeatedly, and as an invitation, I took it to really go and be as one with God. Can you just share a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to, Steve. I think it's the basis of all of the rest of the Conversations with God messages, and for that matter, the basis of a life being human that allows us to experience our true and real identity. When we go within, what we encounter there is who we are. What we encounter there when we go within, and I'll talk about what going within looks like in just a moment, but when we go within, we go to the place where we exist. That is where we, the collective of us, where all of us in our oneness exists. That is the place where we make our direct line connection to what I call, in my cosmology, in my languaging, God itself, divinity, if you please. And divinity exists in the silent place between the heart and the mind. And so that's what is meant by, if you do not go within, you go without. Not only do you wind up going outside of yourself, but you also go without all of the wonderful, extraordinary, almost countless benefits that you would accrue and experience and achieve if you go within. Going within once or twice or 3 times a day. I've listed many different kinds of ways to go within, by the way, in my books. I'll talk about those in just a moment. But so the question that we ask ourselves then as we live our daily lives is, do I source my experience of life from within or from without? Steve, you said something kind of interesting a moment ago. You said, we go to see movies like Avatar and other wonderful motion pictures, or read wonderful books and so forth. We open our mind to the experience of oneness, and Avatar was a wonderful way to do it, and there are others as well. And then we leave the movie theater, or close the book, or step away from the lecture, or leave the workshop and go right back to our living the illusion. Well, in fact, we do. In fact, we do, and not meaning to contradict you directly, Steve, but in a sense, we should. Conversations with God says you need to live the illusion. So don't be surprised, don't be frustrated by the fact that you leave the theater and step right back into your illusion. Of course you do. That's how the system was set up. I don't want people to get frustrated and say, gosh, Steve's right. I mean, I leave the movie and I step right back into the illusion. Why do I do that? Why do I do that? You do it because it's designed to be that way. As it was made very clear to us in the book Communion with God, those illusions are put into place as specific tools, platforms from which we can experience who we really are. So if you didn't live the illusion, for instance, to use a simple example and a very clear one, if you didn't live the illusion of separation, the illusion of oneness would be utterly impossible. Because in the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. That is, in the absence of separation, oneness could not be experienced by you. You wouldn't even know what oneness meant. Any more than you would be able to enjoy vanilla ice cream if you had nothing but vanilla ice cream, morning, noon, and night for the next 35 years. I promise you, as much as you may enjoy vanilla ice cream, by the end of the 34th year you would say, I don't enjoy it. I don't even know what it is anymore, because there's nothing else. Therefore, in the absence of that which you are not, that which you are is not. Enjoy the illusion. Of course you step out of the theater wishing that you could just live that way, and you step out on the street and you living the illusion again. The trick is not to just not live the illusion. The trick is to go ahead and live the illusion, but use it. Use the illusion as a tool, as a device for which it was intended. The problem is we don't understand that it's an illusion. We think that it's real. We think that the movie that we're watching is the illusion. The movie is a reflection of what is really real. And so if we can understand that what we're living, the illusion we're living, is an illusion, then we can begin to use it as a tool with which to create opportunities to experience the ultimate reality. But you will go back and forth between experiencing the ultimate reality and the illusion, and that's not bad. What's bad is if you think the illusion is real, then you live in a distorted reality. We are, in fact, as a magician who has forgotten his own tricks. So I don't get upset with myself when I fall into the illusion again, because I do it all the time. What I do monitor closely, however, is, am I taking this illusion and making it real, or am I using the illusion to create a contextual field, contrasting elements that allow me to step into that part of the illusory world in which I live that allows me to experience the ultimate reality? That's what true masters have done. That's what the Buddha did. Stepping out into the world of illusion and saying, you know what, I get that the contextual field is required, but I'm having none of it. I'm simply using it as a means by which I can experience the fullness and the richness and the oneness of who I really am. Every other master has done precisely the same thing.
Neale, one of the other things you've shared is that you've said oneness occurs in our experience out of our desire. It is a matter of will, not a matter of action. Can you talk about that?
I can, but I'd like to just back up just a little bit because I didn't get to the fullness of my point about going within. I promised I would mention just ways to do that very quickly. When I talk about going within, there are a lot of ways to go within. It doesn't necessarily have to look like sitting down for 45 minutes, oming with your eyes closed and soft music playing to a candle. It's okay to do that. In fact, it's wonderful to do that. I love doing that. But that's not the only way. And some people just don't do well with those kinds of meditations. There are many different kinds of meditations. In several of my books, I've included a whole section, a whole back section on different ways to find that place of oneness, different ways to, if you please, go within. There are a number of ways to do that. One of my favorites is what I call the stopping meditation, where you stop for 10 seconds 6 times a day. That's 60 seconds a day, 1 minute a day, divided into 6 10-second intervals that allow us to stop all the helter-skelter, stop all the noise, stop all the visual chatter and all the visual stuff that's going on around us. Stop everything, in fact, visual, audible, all the rest, for 10 seconds. And just be quiet for 10 seconds and go within. You can do it, by the way. It's most effective to do it when you're in the middle of something, sometimes even in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes you can find yourself just stopping. Stop. Just for 10 seconds.
Beautiful. Boy, let's breathe into that, huh, Neale?
And be quiet 6 times a day, twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon, twice in the evening. Do that for 90 days, and I dare you to tell me that your life hasn't changed, because it will. But the wonderful part about that little simple exercise is that as you begin to appreciate what those 10 seconds 6 times a day can do for you, you'll begin to yearn for more. You'll say, wait a minute. If that 10 seconds felt that good, what would 60 seconds all at one time feel like? Or for that matter, 10 minutes. Do I have 10 minutes I can spare out of a day to just be quiet like that? And you don't even have to worry about, but how do I connect? How do I connect with God? There must be a process. There must be a way. Show me how I'm supposed to. No, you don't have to worry about it. If you're quiet with yourself for 10 minutes a day for the next 90 days, before long, your inner system, your inner self will show you, it will deliver, it will give you a way without you asking for it. It will deliver a way for you to get in touch with your highest and deepest singular self. It will happen automatically. And so the sounds of silence call you loudly to your highest self. And when you emerge from such moments of deep meditation and deep oneness, in my experience at least, you then step back into the illusion, using the illusion as a tool with which to experience the oneness. That is, you see everyone else in a different way. You experience the events of your life in a different way. You simply recontextualize the entire experience because you've given yourself 10 minutes a day of peaceful contemplation to consider what's really true. That's a tool that I would offer everybody on this call right now. It takes 10 minutes a day. Surely everyone has that.
Beautiful, Neale. Thank you. We are off to quite a start here. Neale, I thought, personal experience is such an incredible guide, and your life has been rich with so many experiences. And I wondered, as we talk about living in oneness in our own life, in the unfolding of your life, what was that like, and where were the moments of oneness where you might share an example or two?
Well, mostly for me, it began in my most intimate relationships. And I'm sad to say, but I must be candid and honest in saying that that didn't happen until 15 years or so ago. That is, the first 45 or 50 years of my life, half century, were spent not even experiencing that. And that's sad for me. I often find myself listening to my father's voice, who used to say to me, "So old, so soon, so smart, so late." But I also observe the perfection of the life path that I have taken. That I think, in fact, that had I not experienced 50 years without what I'm now just going to describe to you, what I did experience would have had, for me, in my own life, less meaning. So each of us finds our own way. I'm not suggesting that you all have to take 50 years to get there. I suspect that you don't have to, but my way was perfect for me. What happened in my life, to give you an example now of what I'm talking about, is I began to experience true oneness, not falsetto oneness or faux oneness, but real oneness in relationship to my significant others, my friends and my family, only in the past 12 or 15 years. First, frankly, it began, you might think, with my romantic partnership, but no, with my children. I began somewhere around 12 or 13, 14 years ago, somewhere in there, to begin sensing that, wow, these kids are me, younger versions of me. Children can do that for parents. Their parents watch carefully. They will see themselves in their children. They will see many of the good parts of themselves if they can acknowledge it, and they'll see some parts of themselves that they're not so proud of reflected in their children's behaviors and activities as well. And I saw that with my older children as well, in particular, 10 or 12, 15 years ago. And as I began to notice that, I thought, oh my goodness, I've created mirrors of me all around me. I have 9 children, so there was no way that I could escape it. It was everywhere to be seen. And I saw it in all of my children. And I began that opened my mind and caused me to consider, is it possible that I'm simply looking at another version of myself? And it began to invite me to shift the way I was reacting and responding to my own children. Because while it was not as evident or as obvious with people in the outer world of my life, my coworkers and friends and so forth, with my children, I was interacting on a very consistent, if not a daily basis. And I would see behaviors in them that I saw in myself, as I mentioned a moment ago. And the question was, how was I going to respond to those behaviors when I disapproved of them or disagreed with them or thought that they might not be the best behaviors that my children might exhibit when I saw the same thing in myself? That was an interesting psychological point for me to encounter 15 years ago. And when I began to encounter it really deeply and significantly, I began to ask myself, whoa, you know what? Maybe I need to change not what I'm seeing my son or my daughter do, but what I'm noticing that I do, because my disagreement or my disaffection with what my children are doing is based on my own unhappiness with the way I'm behaving myself. And by the way, if I didn't see that clearly, my children would point it out to me. That's the wonderful benefit of having children. that they will tell you when you're asking them, to do something that you yourself do not do. My children would say, "Oh, Dad, how about if you do what you're telling me to do?" I'll use one simple example. I would say to one of my children, "You have a real gift for sarcasm. You use sarcasm a lot when you're trying to make a point, and it's not the best way to make a point. I would suggest you drop that from your arsenal." And my son looked at me and he said, "How about if you do it? You go first." And I got it. I got very clearly where he picked up that whole tendency, that whole talent, if you please, to do that. And so that was really my first encounter with oneness. Was when I began to treat and to interact with my own children as if they were simply smaller versions of me, which of course is exactly what they are. Then I wound up finding myself around 7 years ago or so in a remarkable relationship with a significant other in a romantic interaction. And that's my present wife. And she is the person who has allowed me to see myself and to encounter oneness at the next highest level. I see myself all over the actions and interactions of my wonderful wife. She and I really are one. We wear rings on our finger that say other, because we knew as soon as we met, oh, there is my other. Not just in the highfalutin romantic sense, but in fact in every way. The same likes, the same dislikes, the same wonderful tendencies, and some of, frankly, the same faults, if you want to call them faults, the same aspects of our personality that might not be the highest expression of self. We saw all of those things in each other, and that is the glory and the wonder of intimate relationship. We begin to see ourselves in all of our wonder and glory and in all of our completeness as well as the places where we are somewhat incomplete. When we use relationship in that way, it becomes healing, not of the relationship itself, but of our relationship with ourselves. So, you want a practical example? I'll give you a practical example. I'm sitting in the kitchen. My wife is preparing something. She becomes a bit frustrated or a bit annoyed at some small thing that's not going right in the preparation of the meal. She feels that I could perhaps be a little bit more helpful. I really have nothing to do with it, but in that moment it feels to her, it seems to her that part of it at least is my fault. This is a common, simple, everyday misunderstanding. So she turns and she snaps at me. Not viciously, but just a little, just a little statement like, well, at least you could help with cutting up this or whatever, and I look at her and my first reaction would be, there's no need to make that kind of a comment. You don't have to say, well, why would you say that to me? That would have been my first reaction with every other person I've had an intimate relationship with until this one. But I began to sense, wait a minute, that's exactly what I would do in that same situation. I've done it 1,000,000 times, a gazillion times. And so I begin to see myself in my wife. And I look to see what sponsors that statement to me. Did my wife in that moment deliberately want to hurt my feelings? Of course not. Was she attacking me at some level? Of course not. Was she simply venting her frustration in a way that she felt was safe and that she was in safe harbor with me? Absolutely. Do I want to judge the accuracy of her statement or look behind the statement to see what sponsored it and if there's any healing I could offer there? That's when you get up from your chair, walk around the kitchen counter, grab your wife around the waist, hold her close to you for 5 seconds and say, I love you. What can I do to make this moment better for you? I'm here for you. I understand your frustration right now. The meal isn't going as well as you would have liked. Let's see if the two of us can make it more fun and better. And everything shifts and changes. Now, Steve, that's such a small example, but you asked for a real-life example. But here's why it's an important example. I lived through relationship after relationship after relationship for 35 years without ever behaving that way.
And that is so beautiful, Neale. And, this is the unplugged. Just really going down into even these deeply personal experiences and sharing them. And thank you for sharing that. I suspect that you're bringing back lots of things to people listening that it's putting them in touch with concerning their own life and their own relationships and oneness. Let me just do this here real quick before I get to the next question for Neale. I want to just do a quick shout-out to people that are listening. A lot of people have put their name and the city, country here in the instant message window. Jan in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Dave in Aston, Pennsylvania. Vicky in Cambria. Let's see, Anita in the Cayman Islands. Laurel in St. Petersburg, Florida. Beth in Winfield, Illinois. Anne in Mozambique. Marianne in Luzy, France. Adriana in Sparks, Nevada. Sigrid in Emmen, Netherlands. Peter in Chico, California. Gwen in San Francisco. Donna in Chicago. Tamara in Vancouver, British Columbia. Mary in London, the United Kingdom. Pam in Tucson, Arizona. Linda Farrell Small in Irvington, Virginia. Chaplain Dan in Westlake Village, California. Katrin in Paris, and I won't keep reading, but those are some of the messages that have been put in the window. I invite you, if you're listening on the webinar, to put your name, your city, and your country in the instant message window. And if you have comments or questions or inspirations you'd like to share, please put those in the window as well. And there are many comments in here, Neale, to you, and they all basically say the same thing, how moved and touched they have been by the Conversations with God books, and thanking you for the work you do in the world. Neale, I wanted to go to the Friendship with God book because it has these 7 steps to creating friendship with God. It's I'm just looking at page 57 here. It says the 7 steps are: 1, know God; 2, trust God; 3, love God; 4, embrace God; 5, use God; 6, help God; and 7, thank God. And there's an incredible conversation that takes place around these 7 steps, and it occurs to me that this is about oneness and how we develop our own friendship and conversation with God. Is there any wisdom or inspirations or thoughts that you have around that material that you might share?
Well, Steve, yes. First of all, I love Friendship with God as a book. It's just the favorite book of many, many people of the 9 in the Conversations with God's cosmology. I love it because it's really down to earth. It's on the ground. It talks about day-to-day life in a way that some of the other books don't quite get to. Although taken as a collection, all of the books are certainly profound in their messages. But Friendship with God really brings it home on a 9-to-5 basis on the ground. And one of the steps to Friendship with God that people have talked about a lot with me is this business of help God. Like this, does God need help? What does helping God look like? And I'd like to, since you brought it up, talk about that particular aspect of the 7 steps to friendship with God. But first, before that, why bother having a friendship with God in the first place? What's that all about? If we're going to acknowledge, if we are of a mind that tells us that, yes, there is something out there in the universe, call it God, Allah, Brahman, Jehovah, Yahweh, by whatever name it pleases you to refer to that ineffable essence that we call the divine. But if we agree that there's something larger than us out there that we are a part of, if you please, that all of life is a demonstration of, would it not make sense to decide in a very positive and powerful way what our relationship with that essential essence is? That is, we have to ask ourselves some questions. First of all, what is it essentially? Basically, what is that essence? Number 2, what, if anything, does it want? Number 3, what is our relationship to it? Now, as a child, I don't know how it's been for you, my lovely friends who are on this call with me, but in my life as a child, I was taught essentially, to put it in simple terms, to fear God. That it was, in fact, good for me to grow up to become a God-fearing man. So I had a relationship all through my childhood until probably my 14th or 15th year of what I call a fearship with God. And I'm sorry to say that many of the world's mainline religions also tend to create in people a fearship with God, that we think that God is an entity or an essence, if you please, to be feared. As long as we're obeying God's laws and doing what God wants and obeying God's commands, we're all right. We'll probably be okay. But if we slip and fall or don't understand something completely, or perhaps in the case of some teachings, if we are simply approaching God, no matter how good we are, how nice we are, just going by the wrong path, then we're never going to really return home to God, and God will be furious with us at the end. So we have been taught about a God of furiosity, if I could coin a word, a God who is furious with us if we misbehave, a God who punishes us if we misbehave. In fact, if you read the Bible, if you pick up the Bible with a calculator next to your Bible and punch in the numbers every time the Bible refers to someone who has been killed at the hand or the command of God, you'll count up almost 2 million people. I'll repeat that. You might have missed it. 2 million people have been killed at the hand or the command of God if one is to believe Holy Scripture. So that's the kind of a God that we've told ourselves about in humanity's understanding of the divine. And so, but I never experienced God that way. I experienced God in my life for sure. I knew even at the age of 7, 8, and 9, there must be something larger out there. You can't look at the night sky, for heaven's sake, on a summer evening without becoming very clear, oh my gosh, I am just this tiny, minuscule aspect, this grain of sand on the beach kind of an aspect of the universality of life. Look at this night sky. There's got to be something larger that is created and is now in charge of things. It would be foolhardy for me to think that I'm it, that I'm the ultimate, the penultimate expression of intelligent life in relationships at all that I'm looking at on a summer evening. So, since I knew at the age of 7, 8, and 9 there's got to be something larger out there, I always felt, don't ask me why, well, I can tell you why, my mother. But my mother always felt, and I got it from her, that yes, A, there's a God, and B, God's our friend, our best friend, would never punish us or condemn us to everlasting damnation for something as simple as wanting to be good but simply choosing the wrong credo, the wrong dogma, so that if you're generous, kind, caring, compassionate, wonderful, and sweet and loving as anyone could possibly be, but you happen to be Jewish, or you happen to be Hindu, or you happen to be Muslim, or you happen to be whatever, not belonging to the right religion, God sends you to everlasting damnation and punishes you in the fires of hell forever. Nobody could reasonably believe in a God like that, which is why we've been pushed away from God. So now, help God means that we give the God of the universe our assistance in expressing and experience itself as who and what it really is. Because without us, all of humanity and all of life, if you please, joining in the process by which God is redefined and re-experienced, and by which God experiences itself fully as what it really is, without our assistance in that process, the process cannot take place. We need to know something that's almost dramatic to say, but let me say it anyway, as dramatic as it may sound. We are as important to God as God is to us. To understand that biologically, think of a single cell in your body, or a single organ, your heart or your liver, or any other organ of your body. That is as important to your whole body as your body is to that. So what you want to know is that God is nothing without you. I like to kid around with God a lot and say, you know what, you're nothing without me. And God says, my son, you're absolutely right. You're right, because you are that which I am. And you are the expression and the experience at the highest level you can conjure of who and what I am and who and what I choose to be. Now that we understand our relationship with each other, we can really be friends, knowing that in the most wonderful, joyful, spiritual way, we're in this together.
Beautiful, Neale. Beautiful, and so wonderful that you're touching on this whole aspect of fear, which is so often the human experience when we talk about the divine, isn't it?
It is, and it's one of the reasons why I woke up many years ago and thought what we really need on this planet right now is a civil rights movement for the soul. We've had civil rights movements, for blacks. We've had civil rights movement for gays. We've had civil rights movements, if you please, for women, for all of the minorities that we have been able to identify on the earth. Now it's time to launch a civil rights movement for the soul, freeing humanity at last from the oppression of its beliefs in a violent, angry, and vindictive God. We're the pioneers in this particular movement. I want to tell you, in 50 or 100 years, this will seem like elementary information. People, your children's children's children, your great-grandchildren will not be able to believe that we actually held the notion that the deity of the universe is a violent, angry, and vindictive God who will punish you with everlasting damnation for the slightest aberration or what it imagines to be your offenses, as if God, in any event, could be hurt or damaged or injured in any way. Talk about being children of a lesser God. And in 100 years or less, in 50 years perhaps, we will look back on these days and wonder how we could have ever held such notions, such ideas, such beliefs. So rapid is the advancement of our evolutionary process, however, that we will achieve in the next 30 to 50 years what we have not been able to achieve in the last several thousand, because our evolutionary process, our consciousness, our awareness is increasing exponentially, not in any small measure by the work that you and I are doing today. It's important to understand that as members of humanity's team, you, those of you on this call right now, all over the world, have an opportunity to become part of that process, pioneers in the process of bringing humanity to a new and larger understanding of life itself and of who and what God is and who and what we are in relationship to it. I want to ask a fundamental question here. It's a question I put before audiences everywhere around the world. How is it possible for all of us, 7 billion of us, to all want the same thing? And fundamentally we do. We all want health, safety, security, prosperity, understanding, peace, joy, love, equal opportunity, all the rest. We all want the same thing. How is it possible for 7 billion of us to hanker after the same outcome, to yearn for the same experience, and be singularly unable to produce it except for the tiniest minority of us? That 95% of the world's people are not even close to experiencing what we all say we want to experience. Is it because the human race is simply stupid? Simply just doesn't understand? Or is it possible that there's something we are simply not understanding fully about God and about life, the full understanding of which would change everything? I think that it's clear that the human race is not ignorant. We've put a man on the moon. We've deciphered the human genome. We are a very intelligent species. We simply need one more piece of missing information, the true nature of life and the true nature of divinity. That's the information that will change everything. And you, my friends, listening on this call, can be a singularly important part of the process by which humanity recognizes itself at last.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that, Neale. Let me share here briefly. The call, at least today, is maxed out, so people coming on to the call now need to go onto the webinar, and the code on the webinar is Oneness. You can find the link to the call on our Facebook sites. The Humanities Team Worldwide Facebook site might be the easiest one to find a link to the this conference call. Also, the livinginone.com site, which is the summit site. And then I also wanted to share, Neale brought in the Civil Rights Movement for the Soul, and of course that's what Humanities Team is. Humanities Team is the Civil Rights Movement for the Soul, and if you haven't already joined us, I invite you to go to the humanitiesteam.org site and hit the join button, and you can join us. The Civil Rights Movement for the Soul, awakening ourselves in the world of oneness. Neale, as we segue over to the spiritual leadership part of this conversation and just talk about becoming a conscious public service leader. Let me ask this question. How can we find the faith and courage to follow our dreams?
By giving someone else the faith and courage to follow theirs. I've learned in my life that the fastest way to experience anything that I want to experience is to cause another to experience that same thing. It's a remarkable formula. We've been given this formula, by the way, many, many thousands of years ago by many, many spiritual masters. The one with which I am most familiar in terms of languaging is this statement that we've all heard in our lifetime: do unto others as you would have it done unto you. Now, that's not just a moral injunction. That's not just a nice, spiritual aphorism. It happens to be an instruction. That is, it's the details on the side of the box that tells you how to make the game work. It's the instructions that come with the game, and the instructions tell us this is how it works. Do unto others. These are the directions we are getting. Do unto others as you would have it done unto you, because what you do unto others is done to you, because there's only one of us, because oneness is a reality, not a hope or a wish or a desire. It's what's so. It's what's true. And whether we're experiencing it or not is merely a matter of our own perception and our perspective. Now, how we can gain that perception, how we can acquire that perspective, how we can step into oneness, how we can, for that matter, step into any aspect of divinity that it pleases us to experience and to express, is to cause another to experience and to express it. If you want to experience, have the courage, as you've just indicated, Steve, the courage and the passion and just all that energy that it takes to step into this magnificent worldwide opportunity. All we have to do is be the source of this for someone else. What you inspire others to do, you will be inspired to do yourself. So I've stopped trying to get myself into a place that I've always wanted to be. I've started years ago putting other people into the place that I have always wanted to be. All of us want to be loved. All of us want to have courage. All of us want to have passion for what we're doing in life. All of us want to have all the wonderful aspects of life expressed that we have heard about. And my entire cosmology, the way I approach the wholeness of my life, has been turned around dramatically as a result of a single statement that I heard in conversations with God many years ago. I asked God, why isn't my life working? I don't understand. Why is it just a process of continuing struggle? What don't I understand here? And God just kind of chuckled and said, Neale, it's all really very simple. You think your life is about you. And it's not. Your life is about everyone else whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. Now, in the broadest sense, of course, your life is about you because there's nobody else but you. But speaking in the normally used human sense of the words, your life is not about local you. It's about universal you. And how you serve universal you is by serving all of the other local versions of you so that they can have the same experience that you have. That's why the greatest master is not the one with the most followers, but the one who creates the most masters. And so our opportunity here, if we're looking for the compassion and the passion, for the courage and the bravery, for the energy and for the will to step into the world in a way that allows everyone to experience their oneness, is to cause others to have the exact same thing. That's exactly why I spend my life going around the world talking to people, or sitting on the telephone for that matter, making comments exactly like the one I'm making right now.
Beautiful, Neale. Let me read one comment that I think is insightful, and then one question. The comment is from Raylene in Tacoma, Washington. She says, my first experience of oneness was when, in a spiritual class, I realized that every single student there had the same core limiting belief. As we all shared our deepest fear, not enough, not smart enough, prosperous enough, pretty enough, educated enough, etc., I suddenly realized that we are all one, and together we explored the illusion, and then we explored the truth together. I never felt like I belonged anywhere before, but I experienced a deep, deep shift that day. Thank you, Raylene. That is a beautiful comment. And then here's a question from Ruth in Lima, Peru. How can I restore the feeling of loving God? I seem to agree with the concept, but I don't seem to be able to reconnect with the experience of loving God.
Well, Ruth, I just gave the answer a moment ago, and I'll give you another version of the same response. Cause another person to reconnect with their desire and their experience of loving God. If you do nothing else for the next 3 months, but be at cause in the matter of other people reconnecting with a loving God and with their love of God and their desire to love God, if that's all you do for the next 3 months, you will have a direct experience of that yourself. That's the fastest way that I know to experience what it is you choose to experience. There's a slow route as well. I can talk about that just for a second without having to do what I've just suggested, Ruth. You may want to sit down each night of your life and start what I call a gratitude journal. I do this verbally in my head each night. I used to do it with a journal, but now and writing it down, but now I do it verbally because it takes me. I'm used to it. It's a process that I've enjoyed, and I'm used to it, and I can do it in about 10 or 20 seconds. Each night when I'm about to retire and go to sleep, I close my eyes and I run through all of the things for which I am grateful that day. And I actually name them. I don't just kind of think of them obliquely. I actually say sentences in my mind. I actually force my mind to form a sentence. I'm grateful for the fact that I was able to get up early this morning and finish what I didn't finish yesterday and still meet my deadline. I'm grateful for the fact that it didn't rain this afternoon when the painters were coming over to finish painting the fence in the backyard. I'm grateful for the fact that my wife was so kind to me this evening and made me a beautiful, wonderful dinner and has been so generous with her time and her energy and her emotional wealth with me this evening. I'm grateful for the fact that the pain in my left thumb has gone away and I don't have that anymore. You know, whatever your list is. And you know, I do that every single night of my life before I go to sleep. And suddenly, I find myself saying almost spontaneously, I'm grateful for the life itself that I'm living, this wonderful experience that I'm having. I'm grateful for every single moment of it. And you know what, God? I'm grateful for you. I love you to pieces. What a nifty essence you are to give me this extraordinary experience of life. Who could ask for more? Help me to love others as you have loved me. And that's my nightly routine. Ruth, it may not work for you, but it sure works for me.
Beautiful, Neale. Thank you. This last part of the call is the part of the call that talks about being a conscious public leader. So, Neale, let me ask this question. How have you approached walking out on the world stage as a conscious public service leader? I'm guessing that if we were to go back 15 years to when CWG started, and even in your own family and among your friends, there must have been some lack of support. So how have you approached this, being a conscious public service leader? What wisdom might you share?
I think the biggest wisdom, if I could call it that, just my experience, I don't know whether it's wise or not, but my experience would ask me to share this with you. In my own experience, I've learned that the way to be a leader, a so-called leader, is not to be attempting to produce a particular outcome. If I am doing what I'm doing in order to try to produce a particular outcome, a certain number of sign-ups, a certain level of response, a certain number of books sold, or a certain attendance at my lectures, or whatever it is I think I'm trying to produce as an outcome, a certain number of converts, a certain number of members, whatever. If I'm goal-oriented in that way, I'm going to be done before I start, because unless I achieve those outcomes, I'll consider myself to be a failure. First of all, that's not even the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. So I have to get very clear. So for me to step into leadership, it was about understanding what leadership is about and what I'm really trying to do. Leadership does not mean follow me. Leadership means I'll go first. I'll go first. But first in what? I'll go first in what? See, what am I trying to do? I'll go first in getting the most number of memberships signed up? I'll go first in having a certain number of people attend my lecture? No. That's not, all of a sudden it's very clear to me. That's not really what I'm trying. I will go first in doing what I can, whatever I can in every moment of my life to call forth the highest demonstration of divinity that moment allows. I promise myself, and I promise you, that I'll go first in that demonstration. That's how I will be a leader, to demonstrate what I'm really here on the planet attempting to achieve and to accomplish. And if I can go first in that way, in that particular function and activity, then I find that everything else falls into place. I find myself being invited into what the world would call leadership activities or positions. Come and give a lecture, or would you write another book, or could you lead a seminar, or could you show up at this leadership conference? Because people begin to recognize, that is to recognize, that is they begin to know again who they really are by observing who you are when you're being who you really are. They recognize themselves. And that's leadership, when you cause other people to recognize who they are by the way you are being, not by what you're doing, but by the way you're being. I'm going to throw a rose here, which I've not been asked to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's one of the reasons that Steve Farrell is so incredibly effective as the leader of Humanity's Team, a worldwide global organization with 73 countries and several hundred chapters and so forth. The reason that Steve is so powerful in doing that is that when he steps into the room, the place of beingness that he holds, he's always being soft and gentle, compassionate and caring, consensus building and agreeable, and he's always being totally non-offensive and totally loving and totally into the place of experiencing other people's point of view as if they were his own, and doing that with great compassion and insight. That kind of beingness, when it walks into a room, cannot help but produce the outcome of other people asking you, lead us, not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And they see that in Steve. And we see that in all great leaders. We saw it in Lincoln. We saw it in Washington in terms of American leadership. We saw it in leaders of other countries, in Gandhi. It's exactly what we saw in Gandhi. We made Gandhi a leader because he gave us back to ourselves by the way he was being. So, you want to step into leadership? Step into a firm decision to be your own highest demonstration of the grandest notion you ever had about yourself, and the world will lift you up into leadership without you even asking it to.
Well, thank you for that, Neale. Thank you for the wisdom and the warmth. And as I've shared, many times over the years, we are a mutual admiration society, aren't we? Thank you for just the incredible leadership you bring to the world through your life work. Neale, we're down to the last 3 minutes. Are there one of the questions we have on the website that was a question that several people brought in? It was, are there mistakes to avoid? Are there things as people are looking at living in oneness and being a public service leader in oneness? Are there things you might caution people about?
Well, in the spiritual sense, there are no such things as mistakes. There are only steps on the road to our next evolutionary stopping point and our next evolutionary, the next juncture in our evolutionary path. So spiritually speaking, I wouldn't worry about mistakes. I think the biggest mistake we can make is to worry about making mistakes. But in a more common use of the words, let me acknowledge that as human beings usually understand the question, I would say this. Ego, for me, has been the area where I have to watch out for making mistakes. I try very, very hard. I don't always succeed, but I try very, very hard to keep my ego in check, to stop myself from thinking that somehow or another, in some way, shape, manner, or form, I'm bigger, better, or more than anybody else. Again, I don't always succeed at that, but I'm doing better with it than I did in the years past, because I've come to see that when I fall into the temptations of the ego, I block myself and stop myself from experiencing the highest notion and the grandest expression of who I am that it's possible for me to experience in any given situation, circumstance, or moment. So I would say watch out for your ego. Allow yourself to, somebody had a great acronym for ego, edging God out. And I always remembered that. I thought, yeah, that's exactly what ego is, in a sense. Now, I don't want ego to have a bad rap. Ego has a place, Without ego, you wouldn't understand yourself as your local self. You would not be able to differentiate yourself from all the rest of you, which we call us. So ego is not a bad thing in and of itself, but ego run amok is what I'm talking about, ego out of control. And my ego has been out of control at certain points of my life. I'm not too proud to admit it, and that would be the mistake that I would think we should watch out for. But again, in the largest spiritual sense, even that's not a mistake. The biggest mistake is worrying about making mistakes. So if I've made some so-called mistakes with my ego run amok, they've taught me what I needed to learn in a way that was powerful in my own experience, which has stopped me from going in those directions in the future. So in that sense, like a scientist in a laboratory undertaking an experiment, there's no such things as mistakes. There are simply outcomes that point us in a different direction that allow us to move more accurately and more efficiently and more effectively toward the goal we seek to achieve.
If you'd like to receive all of our new podcast episodes, please click on the subscribe button. To find out more about Humanities Team transformational education programs and about how you can help support our mission, please visit us online at humanitiesteam.org, where you can also sign up for our email list so we can let you know about our free online events and other news about what we're up to each week. And again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. Thank you.